Hey everyone, in this video, we're going to talk about logic functions in Excel. Thus far, we've used kind of basic formulas and functions like sum, average, max, min. A lot of the fields typically when we see here the auto sum, these are the most common functions. But we're going to talk about a new one today, logic functions using the if function, if function. So we'll begin and I'll just go over this scenario here. So as a teacher, you have many final grades to review to determine who passes or fails a course. Students will pass the course if they have an average above 64%. Using Excel's if function, you can quickly determine who fails and who passes the course based on students' average grades for the year. The process is described below. So yeah, I've got some data here. We've got different student names, and this is their average. We're going to use an if function to talk about how to automatically decide or to see whether a student is passing or not, right? And so an if statement typically has a couple, a if formula or function uses a different argument to decide this, right? So they're typically, just to back it up a little bit, when we're thinking about logic, we oftentimes use if statements. If this happens, then, if this is true, then talk about this, right? Or if output this result. If this is false, then output this separate result, right? And so we, for if statements, use different conditional operators, right? And so these are all, you might be familiar from math, right? Equal signs, equal to, if something is greater than, something is less than. And this in Excel, if not equal to is both this symbol here, kind of the greater and less than together. And then if something is greater than or equal to, it's a greater than and then equal sign. And then a less than or equal to, this is this sign here, okay? And so we use these symbols here for drafting or completing an if statement here in Excel. So this is how the formula looks. Equals, the function is if, open parentheses, and then the condition. And so in our case, we're talking about if a grade is above 64, then we're gonna say if it's above 64, then we know that that person has passed the class. If it's below 64, anything 64 and below, that person fails the class, right? And so this if statement, that's how generally we think about that. And then we're gonna go ahead and show you an example here. So let's look at some of the student data. So for example, Richard has a 60% average. We know based off of this that he actually would not pass the class. So how do we do this with an if statement? So to initiate that, press equals, and we'll type an if. And you notice that's a function that'll automatically kind of pull up here. We're going to do an open parentheses. And then you see this tooltip here, this example. If we're saying um, if this grade, right, and then we're going to use these cell references here. That way we can copy that later. If that grade, here's 60, is greater than symbol, then if greater than 64, and then we hit comma to initiate this kind of next section here. If it's greater than 64, what do we want that to say? We want that person to say pass. And we're using quotes here because we're using this text. We could actually do calculations as well with different numbers, but for our purposes here, we just want this text. And so if it's above a 64, we want that to say pass. And if it's otherwise, if it's not above, then it's going to be fail, okay? And we want to close parentheses. And when we hit enter, we can expect that because this is a 60 average, it's going to say fail, which is what that had put up. And so if I went ahead and copied this formula, I can just drag this down. And we know this person here, Kamisha, has a 93 average. We drag this down with this exact same formula, it should say pass, which it does, right? And so as I'm clicking here and we're looking at this formula bar, right? Nothing has changed except this cell reference here. and that's just because we've copied it down. So you can actually copy this down, and so we just to test it, 58, this is going to be fail. We do it one more time. This is at 64. It's above 64 is a pass. This one we're saying should be a fail, and that's correct. This one should be pass, and then this does that for everything else. But you can go ahead and select this, and then double click, and you can see that yes, 59 would be fail, 88 pass, 62 is fail as well. Okay, and so you can see again as I'm scrolling up here, all of this, only thing changing here is this reference. Okay, and so what I did here was I initiated the if function by typing that in equals if. Okay, because I know that from my years of doing this, and as we're learning this for the first time, this is something new, so you might not remember that. The other way to access this is to go here to the formula section, and then you've got all these different functions here. There's actually two ways to go about that. You can go click on insert function, and then you can type, which allows you to search for that. Okay, but as you can see, this was already one of the more common functions. So we just click on this. Okay, click on OK. And then what that does, it brings up if, you're going to do the same thing. If, this kind of just walks you through step by step. If that is greater than 64, then what happens if that's true? We're saying pass. And what happens if it's false? Fail. Okay, and what's great about this particular option is we get to see what that output will be, right? And they kind of walk us through that a little bit more easier. And again, we can just copy this down, and we can see the exact, but this is the exact same thing. We just access this function in a different way. And the other way to do this, okay, this is using the insert function option, okay? And then the other one is if we just went to the formulas here and we did the logical reference, and we just click on if, and same thing. We're just clicking that above 64. And what happens? This is pass, fail, and press OK. And so this is logical formula. Okay, and again, we're just going to do equals, or not equals, logical if, again, we're going to click here, is greater than 64, pass, fail. Okay, and I want to see what happens if we get rid of that parentheses. Okay, and actually, by not having that there, it automatically added that for us, which was great, right? Because if I decided to get rid of this, equals if this is greater than 64, comma, pass, comma, fail. Let's see what happens. So it doesn't recognize that because we're not using the quotes, right? But if we went ahead and used the formula option above, it would automatically put that in. It would know what we were talking about, right? So I'll delete that there. And again, why is it important that we're just using these cell references, right? Because if I change this grade, maybe Richard changes his grade later. He actually gets a 70. What happens here? That automatically changes to pass, right? So that's what's great about using these cell references instead of typing the number, because these grades can update, right? Their averages can update, and that's going to automatically update in the future as well. Okay, but this goes over if functions, and so go ahead and start on your own completing lessons right now. Thanks.